This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Caroline, it is so lovely to have you here. I'm so glad we're finally getting to meet. I've had the pleasure of working with your sister and have followed along your journey and have just been, loved watching you kind of grow and evolve and all the things that you've been building. So it's such an honor to have you on the pod and get to kind of hear more in depth all that you've built and all that you've done.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat, and everything that you're doing with Gia is so cool. And I feel like you're changing the landscape of this wedding planning space in such a needed way. And so I'm just excited. I'm excited that, I get to hear about what you're doing through my sister, and I'm excited to talk to you about it today. So the whole thing is just awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. So, okay, let's dive in. Take us back to like the moment that you decided to start posting on TikTok, like that
Yeah.
first video. What was that moment? What made you decide to do it? And what made you decide to go after that?
I honestly would say just a creative frustration. TikTok was kind of a new platform at the time, and I was looking for a way to document doing some more like bizarre, creative, intentional stuff for the wedding. And we were in the middle of lockdown. And I had a lot of free time, and I had my first solo apartment, and I kind of turned it into like a craft studio. And I thought that it would be a really good way to hold myself accountable to just document the process of doing some of these projects, specifically like my bridesmaids boxes, and sort of talk through why I was doing things the way that I was doing them. And I posted it really just because you can only save a video if you post it to TikTok. And I don't even think at that time that you could just post it privately. So I posted it with no expectation because it was a dance app at the time. So talking to the camera about like why you're choosing a certain color or doing something a certain way was not necessarily like the bread and butter of that app. And I definitely wasn't going to post it to Instagram. None of my friends had TikTok, so I didn't think that they would see it. I thought everything would still be a surprise. And it sort of blew up from there. And I had that moment of like, oh, do you keep making videos, or what do you do? But because I was actively in that phase of life where like that was consuming my free time, and I was unsurprisingly like enjoying it a lot, I was like, this is great. Like that I have something now to look forward to at the end of the workday, to go and make this like creative outlet of a video in a time where there really weren't other creative outlets where you could like engage with other people. Like we were just stuck in our apartment.
That's so true. I feel like the people that really thrive during COVID are the ones that kind of saw it as an opportunity and like took it for what it was and just like ran with the opportunity where you have everyone else around you is paused and you have suddenly this amount of time that you've never been given before or will likely never get again. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. Did you think that it was going to go as viral as it did? Like, what was that moment?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the thing is that a lot of my content too is long form, which is still not popular on social media. And so for that style of content that was not, backed by music, that was narrative, like strictly talking to the camera, and longer form to go viral, it was such a surprise to me. But at the same time, it was kind of exciting because I was living in an area where I didn't feel like there were a lot of creative outlets in general, like not just during COVID. I didn't live in New York at the time, and I was wanting to live in New York. Like I'd always wanted to. And so I just sort of was stuck in this place. Like, I don't feel like I'm meant to be here in this like town of Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't feel like, there's a lot for me to do. There are not a lot of groups for me to join. I wasn't feeling like there were art classes I could go to before COVID, so definitely not in COVID. And so I didn't feel like there was like a good community of people interested in what I was interested in. And so it was the discourse that was the best part for me. And so like having people come and comment ideas or feedback or just support, or give me other resources to use was the most cool part about that experience. And I think it's why I kept going, because I realized that like I might not be geographically in an area that could surround me with people that were interested in what I was interested in or going through the same life phase, but I certainly could find them somehow, some way, and through this app. And I think that's what sort of motivated me to use the app in that way, and then to build that type of community.
That's so cool. I feel like that's what social media does for so many, where you may not have access to or reach to certain resources or certain people where you are geographically located, or maybe that's just the network you're in. But like you can suddenly unlock that if you are on social media and have a presence there. You can unlock so many resources and so many connections. It's just amazing. What do you think was so different about your content? Like, what do you think it was about your I know you mentioned long form, but was there anything else like about your wedding content or your style or, you know, about your wedding even maybe specifically that made it so unique and really kind of take off?
Yeah, I think that, well, I first I'd like to say that I did not realize that this was different, but like I went into it sort of like a wedding is a lot of money, whether you have a small budget or a large budget. Every budget is a lot of money when you're talking about throwing a party for like this dollar amount. And so when I saw the options of what you could spend that amount of money on, I was like, there's absolutely no way that somebody should feel like they're getting bottom of the barrel, cheap, whatever, for something that's still such a high price tag. Like, that's insane. It's a scam. And I've always been interested in weddings from a bridal fashion standpoint, always. I started to get really into the other inner workings of it. And I started to challenge, are these really all of my options? Is there no way to think outside of the box or get creative to use a different cake company and, do a lot of small cakes instead of one big cake and, work with them on different flavors and icings and whatever in a more non-traditional way. It didn't seem like very far-fetched for me. I just was trying to do the most with what I had, and I wanted it to feel very intentional. And I quickly realized that, weddings, the wedding industry, and I still stand by this like 4 or 5 years later today, it was a bunch of old men that sort of created this group decades ago, and they decided who vendors were going to be, who suppliers were going to be, what the inventory was going to look like, and they all did it the same way. And they were able to charge, whatever they wanted to charge, because those are your options wherever you look, for chair rentals, for florals, for whatever. And so, they had that, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it mentality. And they never really had to adjust anything. So I just realized that your options were your options, and they were able to sort of pull you around and do whatever they wanted to do with you. And when I realized that, I realized that I was not the only person realizing that I was like not the only person that was unhappy with that situation. And so I had a lot of time, and again, it was COVID. And so I really enjoy this stuff. Wedding planning can be so overwhelming. And just because you're a type A person does not mean that you enjoy wedding planning. And some type B people find that they really enjoy it. Like, a lot of things that you would think are prerequisites for someone who might enjoy planning their wedding or planning a very detailed, large wedding, often they go out the window when the time comes. Like, it's very hit or miss whether you enjoy that specific stressful environment of planning a wedding or not. I happened to love it.
Yeah, I feel like I was working full time and I suddenly had this like second full-time job that I realized that I was signing up for when I had to plan the wedding. And you have to carve out the time to do it. And it's like pulling you away from your actual job. And it's a creative outlet for sure. And I'm a creative person, so I enjoyed it. But if you don't have the kind of creative bug in you, I could see how it could just become this like massive stressor for people who just have no idea where to start and like where to even turn.
And I also think it can be very disheartening. And then you look at everything that you're spending the money on and you realize, that none of it really speaks to you. And that industry was long overdue for some, fresh players. And I think that that has happened a lot over the past 5 years. But I just hit it at a specific time where, no one was challenging it quite yet. Our generation, I don't know, a lot of our parents are divorced. It's been nailed into us to really like value marriage. We're kind of like a risk adverse generation, I think, in that way. So I think that we take getting married very seriously. And because of that, I think that we wanted to do it very intentionally in our own way and not really like confide to the rules of the old game. And we ended up in this situation where now we have all of these really cool young women in the industry, these new founders with these new ideas, pushing boundaries. And it's been the most rewarding thing to even be a part of with other people. So I could never be grateful enough for like even being in the conversation of that stuff. I just think that I hit it at the right time. And that's the coolest coincidence ever.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think it sounds like the perfect mix or combination of like elements where timing and just the need for this industry to see a fresh perspective was just perfect for when you were going after it. Okay, talk to me about everything but the dress. How did you come up with this concept? How did this originate? What was the like kind of beginning inception of it?
So one of my best friends and I, she actually had the idea for everything but the dress. So I've always been a huge fan of brick and mortar. I love the ability to go in and see something in person. As someone who has always been interested in fashion and specifically bridal fashion, it's this meeting of the minds where like, just because something looks ugly on the hanger does not mean that it looks ugly on you. That's the importance of needing to go into a store and see a piece of fabric or a clothing item in real life. And B, bridal doesn't tend to have any brick and mortar presence unless you're doing a bridal appointment for your wedding dress. And even then, you're tracking down specific designers that are represented at specific boutiques in your area, or do you need to travel? So I always felt like that was a huge problem, and we weren't pushing the boundaries on what other brands were out there that could also apply to bridal wardrobe and people that wanted to get into the space and bring in fresh blood. My friend Jenna owns a bridal streetwear brand, Bride Merch. And so she had this idea that brands would come together and it would be a brick and mortar type of experience. And she came up with the name Everything But the Dress. And that was the inception of it. And we sat down over wine and we dreamed about it, brainstormed the whole thing. We started with what I started with my wedding, which is, and I think I always will start with this concept with any business that I do, is how do you want this to feel? What should the emotional experience be? And if you feel like that's an emotional experience worth curating or missing in the market, then go for it. But you need to have that as your ultimate goal. It's not just a place to come and shop. And we've seen people try to do iterations of Everything But the Dress. And we've had someone try to take our idea, a very large brand actually. And
what? No way. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And, and it is frustrating, but then it is also reassuring, because if you have the passion and the heart behind an idea and you have the correct motive and you go into it with, I'm not just putting pieces of a puzzle together. I have a specific vision and it's emotionally driven and it's experience driven, then it's very hard for someone to rip you off. Like everybody can have an idea, but can they execute it in the way, that's as well intentioned as you imagine? And I think that's the difference at the end of the day. And while it took us such a long time to launch Everything But the Dress, it's why it was so successful for us when it finally came to fruition.
100%. I feel like if you don't look at competition as a form of flattery, you're missing an opportunity, because it's just something that should fuel the way you operate. And to your point, nobody can really mimic the way you execute and who you are and who your brand is, because that's something that's irreplaceable. And, even if someone tries to come in, I feel like that's just good validating data points that shows there's clearly a need in the market for what you're doing. And there's clearly desire to kind of fill that gap from all angles. So I love that perspective. So how did you guys bring together the right bridal brands? How did you get in touch with the right partners and the right contacts that you needed to bring this vision to life, beyond just the inception, right? Like what was then the execution, and how did you get the right people in the room?
Yeah, the execution was so incredibly difficult and it was long. And I think that's one thing that I have learned through Everything But the Dress and the podcast, is that creating something is not for the weak, but it's because it takes extreme patience. Just extreme patience. Like not even like, oh, at some point you're just going to do it just to do it and it might not be perfect. Like I know people say that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like there are a lot of times where you feel like this can't get done at all. And you just have to have the patience to almost like even put your pen down and revisit it later, knowing that timing is everything, especially with brand, especially with feedback. You're going to get a lot of no's. Use it as redirection. We actually originally targeted a much larger venue with more of a department store feel. And while that still is something that we would love to do in the future, we had to swallow our pride and scale back a little bit. Um, and the way that it ended up was so amazing. But working with these larger brands, we were never looking to work with like big box brands, but we were looking to work with people who we admired in the space that felt like were very substantial, had a great customer base, good manufacturing going on, like large business credibility, all of that. We felt like it would be easier to work with them. We felt like that they would have a more concrete marketing budget, that they would want to come in with a more professional team and sort of put something together. And we were honestly very wrong. And instead of saying, oh, maybe it's just this company, or maybe, it's the industry as a whole, we would say maybe it's just this company and we would go to the next company. And it took us a long time to realize like that's just the industry as a whole. And we were not enjoying the people necessarily that we were interviewing to be a part of everything but the dress. And it wasn't clicking. And I think we realized that, I don't know if we gave it too much benefit of the doubt, but we were looking for female founders for bootstrapped businesses, and we were looking in the wrong place. And once we pivoted and we said, our concept as a luxury, pop-up experience is more of a boutique experience anyways. And so when we do that, we're able to look at different options operationally in terms of venue and overhead and all of these things. And once we scaled back, we were able to say, okay, we don't need to take money from a sponsor. We can bootstrap. And that shifted everything for us. It gave us a lot of autonomy back in the decision-making process. And that was it was a hard decision to come to because it felt like it was the hard way to go about it. I don't know I think it might have been the easier way to go about it the entire time, honestly. But I think it took us a lot of interviewing and reaching out to people, hundreds of people, conversations that didn't go anywhere, people that didn't understand the concept, people that thought it was too big of a risk, people that thought it was the wrong timing, people that wanted, everything from us with nothing in return or to take advantage. It was mostly that for like over a year until we finally put the pen down. I walked by our venue one day. I live in the neighborhood and I was like, I feel like this is the space. We started there. We just sort of pulled the trigger and we pivoted, and it slowly started to come together exactly how we imagined it. I think we were just we were not being open-minded about it at first. And so it set us back.
That's so interesting to hear because I can relate to that as a founder who, there's the pressure to like bring in outside money, and whether you're, getting sponsors or fundraising or whatever the case is, you hear about that so much. And there's this sort of like innate pressure that builds to like raise that money and have that be sort of a flag or of accomplishment, right? But really, I think what is the bigger accomplishment is going the hard way and bootstrapping and having the empowerment to make the decisions and drive things forward. And then that success becomes so much more valuable because you actually got there on your own. Like you truly did it by yourself, and like you made the decisions and it was in your hands, and the success is then all yours. So I think it's really cool because you guys, I can relate to that so much and choosing the hard path. But I think that oftentimes is sort of the path that results in a lot more impact. So what do you think was the biggest learning curve for you in building everything but the dress? What was the most surprising thing in the process?
I think that the most surprising thing was that the venue is the hardest to find and secure. And that has proven to be the case the second time around. And I think that is the point where you want to accept outside money, because you are like, we are bootstrapped and this is really difficult and people don't want to work with you on that. I think that it's okay to accept outside money like at that point, and you should do it really whenever it works for you and your business plan. But for us, we wanted to do something very different. And when you accept outside money, you accept the red tape that comes with it. And they often want to, reuse and replace an algorithm that already works for them when it comes to the marketing of something or the way that a business structure works. And so you lose a lot of the integrity to do something that is original. And so now that we've done it and we have proof of concept, it would be easier now to say like, okay, well, we can accept something on our own terms. I think that the venue search has been extremely, extremely difficult. And there's so much real estate in New York, but I think that maybe it's just the times that we're in. Um, I don't know. I just never really expected that to be the hardest part of a pop up, especially in a city like New York. And I would say the unsurprising, biggest part is that the administrative stuff working with the city and the state for permits is, crazy. The back end of invoicing and scheduling and monitoring 25 different businesses that are working with you. I think that is, I knew that I was capable of working hard, but it suddenly became 7 a.m. mornings to 1 a.m. nights. All I could do was get from my bed to the kitchen table. And then you're there all day. And you're really dedicated to getting it done. And it's work that you really believe in. But the time commitment is more than you could imagine. And it's more than feels like would even be possible on paper when you look at your task to do. It's just everything that you think should take an hour will take 6 business days. And I think that that's something that I would be prepared for in the future.
I think that's such a good point because I think a lot of people want to build something or they want to go down the founder path and they don't realize what level of commitment it's going to take from a time perspective, from like an internal grit perspective, right? Like it's just you have to push through because you believe in it so much and you just there's no other option. Like the option of not getting it done is not even in your head. So you just kind of like run through walls and do what you need to do. But I think so many people aren't prepared for that or kind of realize that when they go down this path of wanting to build something or creating something. But the hours are long and it is brutal because it is just you, especially when you're a bootstrap founder. You're a small team and there's no one for you to be like, hey, can you do this for me? Like, I don't have time for this.
Nope, no. And you're not getting paid either. So it's like you have to find intrinsic motivation. And I think that that's a big thing. And I think that a lot of people do want to be founders. But I was just talking to my friends about this the other day. But like intrinsic motivation is a huge thing. And you're going to have to figure out how to find that in yourself at some point, especially if you want to work for yourself, because you will go a very long period of time without getting paid. And you probably have to do something else to get paid on the side while you're doing this. And you probably feel like you don't have time to do that, or you don't have time to do that and start this new business. And so intrinsic motivation, getting something done because you believe in it, or because you're really proud of the idea, or just because you want to see it through, or you want to provide something, to a market or a consumer, is really all of the skin that you have in the game, especially in the
Absolutely. I
beginning.
mean, feel like it can't even be about money, whether you're getting paid or not. Like, I mean, you're not going to get paid for a long time. And the motivation has to be within you to like, one, think about this beyond the money. And two, like nobody's structuring your day. Your motivation to like wake up and work and spend the entire day working and structuring it the way you need to structure it to get your things done. Like it's on you and it's up to you. So I feel like, yeah, it's all about intrinsic motivation in so many different senses of that concept, because it's about, you're not going to get paid. There's not going to be a financial motivation, and there's not going to be somebody like breathing down your throat telling you how to spend your time or how to structure your day either. So yeah. Okay. I'm super curious about this because you have now built several different ventures. How, as a creator, you probably have so many ideas in your head. How do you decide like which ones you're going to pursue? Which ones are the ones that you're going to like really go after?
This is such a good question. I don't know if it's this way for everybody. I am extremely ADD. And so a few years ago, I like took a literal like legal sheet of paper and I took a marker and I was like, I need buckets because this is ridiculous. Like my brain is going in too many different directions. I want to do too many different things. I feel like I could accomplish some of them with some other things, but like I'm not organized internally. And so I wrote down buckets that I cared about. And obviously like social media was a bucket because it was something that was catapulting me into different areas of life that I hadn't had access to before, which was really cool. And then under that, I said, these are the buckets that I feel like I've actually always had. And these things bring me joy to work on. And so one was, media in more of a mainstream way. So podcasting. And I put under that, like I've always wanted to be a part of a talk show. So like more than being on social media, more than being on a podcast, my goal, like my dream, and you have to ask yourself like what you used to want to do, not like what feels practical today. Like what did you used to want to do? 'Cause you probably still want to do it. I really was like, I always felt like I would have a talk show. So I'm like, amazing. Like I have a bucket of talk media. And however that looks for me and whatever I'm capable of doing right now. And then you sort of like pray that it will open more doors for you down the line into other, sort of goals you have that could be related to it. Another bucket for me was everything but the dress. So that's how I got Honey We're Home. Another bucket for me was everything but the dress. That was honestly, I really enjoy the math and financial and real estate portion of things. I miss working with people. I have always wanted a store. I really don't ever want to leave bridal fashion. And I felt like that was a way to immortalize that because it's putting my energy and effort into something that could be long lasting and not necessarily moved with the times of like the phase of life that I was in as a specific person or a specific, online personality. And it gave me something to put real time into that I could build versus social media is something that you have to recycle every single day. And so getting legs for everything but the dress became a bucket. And then my third bucket is and has always been design. So that's always been my like most pure goal in life. And so then you go through paths like taking the opportunity to do the Amazon collection, and always designing things behind closed doors and learning more information about it and understanding what you need, because I think that that's going to be the hardest business for me to start. I think it's going to be the highest risk business because it takes a lot of capital and inventory that you hold on to up front before you can ever test any type of product to a consumer. And it takes a lot of knowledge that I have a little bit of imposter syndrome on. But that is my third bucket. And because of that, I will always do fashion commentary online. I will always want to be involved in Bridal Fashion Week, which could tie back to everything but the dress, which is great. And I'll always have like that motivation and those goals. And so if I can fit something into one of those three buckets, I feel like I'm on the right path, even though I'm not just going to one job every single day.
I love that methodology because I feel like so many people struggle with like just starting, right? And I feel like that's how you start. That's how you just go, is like you get yourself internally organized and you find the buckets that like mean it's really like your values, right? Like those are the things that you value, and you figure out how to kind of align things that are happening in your life or things you decide to do in your life into one of those buckets. And that's how you live in alignment ultimately to like what your values are and what your goals are. And I love that. I love that approach because it really helps people. I think it's a huge part of kind of just how you get started and how you just go. And really, I think what you were doing is like manifesting before manifesting was a thing. Like, yeah. I feel like you were just putting it out into the world.
Yeah, I was definitely hoping that, yes, manifesting has always been something that I was doing even before I knew that I was doing it. But one thing that I'm very bad at as someone that works for myself is like I do well with order, I do well with routine, and I do well with obligations. I don't do well with like deadlines and reporting to somebody, which makes me a good founder. But on the day-to-day operational side, like I don't thrive in that setting. Like I can get very easily distracted. I can get very easily fatigued. I can get very easily impatient with something. And if I don't have something keeping me accountable, like I am likely to quit it. And I have done that over and over and over again. And so I had to think about like, again, back to the intrinsic motivation, what was going to keep me tied to certain projects, where if I ever got lost or confused or aggravated or impatient or tired of it, like that I could look back and say, there's a reason that I'm doing this. You don't have any better idea on how to get to this place. And what's more important to you is to get to where you're going, so suck up the impatience or suck up the procrastination and figure out how to get back on that path. So I think it helped keep me aligned a little bit. And it also helped give me some stuff that I knew I needed. Like with everything but the dress stuff, I finally have people that I work with, and I enjoy having coworkers, which is something I didn't know until I didn't have them. And so I had to learn those things about myself and figure out how to re-implement them in my life too, which was interesting. And once I did it, it got a little bit more manageable for me.
That makes total sense. And also, what better way to find intrinsic motivation than like doing the things that align to your values and your goals and just like making sure they fit into like the buckets that matter to you. That's the
Yeah.
best way to like make sure that you actually stick to it because you are the one that cares about it the most. How did you see building a personal brand? Like, how did you think about building your personal brand online and aligning that to being kind of a multi-hyphenate founder, right? Like building multiple business ventures and kind of going down multiple different paths. Like, how did you think about that when you were building your online brand, your personal brand?
I think that for me, I started actually when I was doing TikTok at first, and started to ask myself the question if I wanted to do that instead of investment banking. I had already been applying for creative jobs in New York. So I was applying at some fashion houses and I was applying at some PR agencies. And unfortunately, because this was 2020 and 2021, most places were just on a total hiring freeze. Not to mention, if they lifted that freeze, the first thing that they're going to do is probably hire back people they had to furlough. The second thing they're going to do is hire people that live already in New York City because you didn't have people moving to New York at that time. So as someone who was looking to move to New York before COVID and then, still during COVID, but was not actively there, I had a very low chance of getting even an interview at any of these places that I was applying to. And I knew that. And the longer time went on, the longer my experience in those fields just became absolutely irrelevant. And so I didn't want to apply to banking jobs in New York. I knew my husband, John, was going to, and I had been looking to get out already. So I knew that I really did not want to resort to that. And so I thought, is there a way, because I can't get in front of these people to have an interview, is there a way that I can use my social media as some type of portfolio or some type of application to show my work for what I'm capable of in this industry? And because of that, I did always look at it like, where can this take me in terms of like the next step or a business venture? And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing because part of me needs to be a little bit better at like staying in the moment and just, living in where I'm at. But I do think that when I got the opportunity to take the next step for the podcast or everything but the dress, and really the first thing was the Amazon drop line, I was prepared for it. Like that's what had been waiting for really the whole time. And I think that I just have a mentality that social media has a shelf life, much like any professional sports player. And so because like that was my sentiment, I sort of had the pressure on myself to catapult it into something else that had more longevity. And again, I don't know if that's the right answer or not. I think that I could do a better job of just, being where I'm at, but I was prepared for that in a sense. And I would still go back and work for somebody else and do a job that I didn't originally wanted to do. And so I think that that's a cool part of it is once you swallow your pride about what it might look like to the rest of the world, you can really do anything.
I absolutely agree. I also think you have to just have a strategic lens to all that you're doing, right? Like social media is a tool. And if you use it as that, like I think it can act in a way that it has for you, right? Where it's really opening doors and opening opportunities. So I think if you take that strategic lens to it and you're really using it as that tool towards a bigger goal, I think that's where it really adds kind of the most value, right? And like, of course, staying consistent and of course, thinking through kind of the content and the type of content you're posting. But really, to me, it's a tool for like bigger visions, bigger goals. How do you think your personal brand or online presence will evolve, like as you move into different phases of life, given, you were obviously started kind of in the bridal phase of your life and like, how do you think that might evolve, if at all, as you move into future phases?
Yeah. I think about this often. For the longest time, I've wanted to just start a separate account that's only commentary on wedding wardrobe. I think I have a large audience that is still dedicated to that because that is really what catapulted me, like beyond wedding planning, is I started to talk about the concept of the wedding wardrobe, and then that started to get, attention. And that was just thrilling for me because I love to pick apart any type of bridal applicable fashion, wherever it comes from. So I've thought about that because I think that I will always want to make that type of content. And I've always thought about making a separate account so it could just like live separately. But I do think that like part of my personal approach online is just being intentional about whatever phase of life you're in. And so trying to, I don't know if romanticize it is the right word, but like trying to approach it with like, what can I do that optimizes this phase of life? What do I need to learn about this phase of life and how do I need to apply it to make sure that it's as personalized to me and as special as possible. I have like one of my deepest fears is being like 90, God willing, on my deathbed and thinking like I should have done this or I could have done this, And so I don't ever want to think that. And so I think that's why I go so hard in certain phases of life. And I think that's what was successful for me in wedding planning is just the mentality. And the good thing about that is I can apply that mentality to anything. So if the future is kids, it's the same mentality. I think I just pick up the mentality and I apply it to anything. I pick up that mentality, I apply it to if, I need to throw my sister a birthday party, or, if we need to do a joint family holiday, or, if I need to do a nursery, or if I needed to move into a new apartment, or whatever it is, like the way that my brain works is just going to be spinning in that way where like that mentality will just apply to whatever I do. So it will always become some type of like intentional time consuming thing in whatever phase of life that I'm in. And I always intend to make it creative. And so I think I'll just take that mentality with me. And I think that the mentality is what no one else can take from me. And like that sort of brain is what is mine to own. And then you relate to people on the phase of life. And so that gives me a little bit of hope because that's more timeless than being stuck in an era.
Absolutely. I think that goes back to like the competition thing, right? Like anyone who tries to do what you're doing, like can't take that mentality, can't take what like your brand is and who you are and how you're executing. And I love that. It sounds like you just go all in, right? Like there's no half-assing anything. You just go all in on whatever it is that is like happening in your life at that time and transferring the skills that you learned from like the previous thing that you did into this new phase of life, which is again like part of how you're strategically thinking about like how to optimize in every phase of life based on like what it is that's going on around you, which I love. I think everyone should be thinking about life in that way. I mean, not everyone wants to maybe be like go go go, but I think like in general, like if you're taking it on and like it's not happening like to you, right? Like you're not looking at it from an external point of view and saying like, oh, this is happening around me or to me. Like, no, life is happening like for you and with you. And like, it's up to you to kind of like take that and like make something of it, regardless of like what's going on and what the phase is.
How are you going to remember it? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I too have the fear of like looking back and thinking, what if I didn't do this or what if I didn't do that or regretting it or like what if I didn't go hard enough or what if I didn't try this, right? Like I always tell people who ask me like, how do I know when to quit my job or how do I know like if I should go for this idea? I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's not going to work out and you learn from it and you figure out something else. I think that's like a great scenario. I'm curious how you see the wedding and bridal space evolving and if that influences your long-term vision for not only your personal brand, but also the ventures that you've built with Everything But the Dress. Like, how do you see the overall industry and space evolving, let's say 5 to 10 years from now? And like, does that impact how you think about building the business?
Yeah, I think that's such a cool question because I feel really privileged to like come up with a new generation of people in the space. I think that over the past 4 years, so many women have entered the space with fresh ideas. They have immediately been met with pushback, questioning, even just sort of like the challenging of the money that goes into this industry. Like, it's an incredible amount of consumer spend. I have never seen an industry with so much consumer spend be so challenged about whether an investment would be worth it. I don't know if it seems silly, or frivolous to investors or people that might back such companies. But I do know that most people I know that have either started on social media or started as designers or, looking to redefine what photography looks like or videography looks like or florals or design and coordination have been met with major challenges and they have fought through them to prove their point. And it's because it's a stupid challenge. It's literally baseless. Like, we all know that these are great ideas. So to be challenged by it is just absolutely stupid. And I think to be challenged by probably a bunch of old men that have been in the industry for 60 years is even more frustrating.
I was
So,
just going to say that. It goes back to who the investor industry is led by, which is male.
yeah,
And
right.
every time I've been told to take out weddings entirely from my pitch deck, just say like
Yeah.
AI, da da da, or whatever, like take out weddings. I've been told, I don't know, like a wedding, my daughter had a wedding and it seemed to go off without a hitch. So I don't really see like what the problem in this space is. Like it's led by men who have no idea what is going on in this
No
space.
idea.
No
So
idea.
I think normally when an industry turns on its head, you see a lot of stuff happen within like 1 to 2 years. I think in this case, it was a lot of women with really great ideas, met with a lot of pushback. They persevered anyways. They had to start really small. Now, especially with everything but the dress, I see these women entrepreneurs with their small businesses and basically orphan status. You would call them a startup. They're working out of their homes. And within a week, they can be booked up for 18 months. Within a week, like they are catapulted to a different level of demand, in which they're forced to grow. And what's so crazy to me about that is that like that is how high the demand is. It's just the lack of people that were willing to put money behind it in the first place caused this like extra 2 to 3 years of like we're kind of like fucking around and finding out what happens, and we knew what was going to happen. But I think because of that, you've got literally hundreds of women who have started these businesses. They're still really small, but you're going to see them in the next 5 years get huge. They have very solid business plans. Historically it has worked for them. They have year over year growth. They are original, they are creative, they are bringing something to the space that nobody has brought to them before, but they are not mainstream yet. And I think that we will start to see them become that, especially like with social media and the reach that people have now. Especially, using resources that you get online versus just going to like you used to go to like a neighborhood store to like pick out your linens, and you don't do that anymore. So I think that we will see it grow into something where there's an entirely new generation of people that run the industry in a much larger way. I think we all know that there are like a lot more players in the industry now, but we're calling them sort of like bespoke or boutique, or like independent. And I hope that every single one of these girls gets funding, gets sold out, gets, every success that they deserve. And I hope they take over the industry. And I hope that they all become household names in this industry. And I don't want to see it any other way. And I think that it took too long and I think it's long overdue, but I think that they're all doing well. And there's no reason for them to not continue to explode.
Amen to that. I love that forecast. I think that is so true. And I think, it's just a matter of like the will and power of like a female founder specifically who can push through all the no's and all the challenges from whatever investor is coming at them and just like keep persevering because we have this like strength and belief. And like we know that like there is a space here where like there is a problem space here where consumers actually need new innovation and like new solutions in a space that actually is like a very meaningful moment in time in life, right? Like these are like life's biggest moments. Like when you're getting married, there is oftentimes that's like the biggest day of your life so far. And there are so few solutions and so few things out there and so few resources. And like that is a problem space that deserves attention and deserves funding. It needs, I feel like you're right, like it's a little bit behind. Like we need to prove out the concept a little bit more, and like it's causing this like sort of delay in innovation in the space, which I hope it catches up, and I hope your forecast is all correct and comes true. I know we're at time. I have a few rapid fire questions. Okay, what advice would you give to women who are afraid to pivot but want to maybe pursue an idea or pivot in their careers?
I would say find a mentor. I actually talk about this a lot because there is a lot of benefit to having a boss because it is somebody who does hold your hand and guides you through what you need to learn in the space. It is the blind leading the blind out there. It is not for the weak, and I don't think that it is fair. There are people who have navigated this industry, and while the landscape may have shifted, they still have very valuable advice to give. So even if it's not finding a business partner to go into it with you so you don't feel like you're in it alone, talk to somebody, ask around, ask someone to go to coffee, and maybe that person won't be your mentor. Maybe you won't get coffee with them again, but it'll make you a little bit more brave to ask the second person to coffee. And eventually, because you're putting yourself in the room with people that do things that you aspire to do or touch that industry, you will find yourself in the room with somebody who you hit it off with, who, will ultimately be such a resource for you going forward. And I think it gives a lot of confidence. I think it gives assurance. I think that it helps you navigate things. And I think sometimes you have a really quick question that you cannot figure out the answer to on your own. Or it would take you 2 hours to figure out, but maybe you could just text somebody and get the answer right back. So I think that having a mentor of any way, shape, or form, someone that you can reach out to for that stuff, I think it's huge because it is treacherous out there.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And having, whether it's a mentor, advisor, like people just that you trust, it's like a safe space to ask questions you feel are maybe silly or stupid, even though there's no stupid questions, but like it's just a safe space for you to like actually lean on someone. And the times are gonna get rough if you pivot. So like you need to have a safe space. And I call it follow the breadcrumbs. I feel like if you do coffee with one person, they're gonna be like, oh, I have 2 more people to introduce you to, or like 3 more people to introduce you to. And those are like little breadcrumbs that you just have to like keep following, and it'll like eventually lead you to some unlock or some opportunity if you just keep following it down and like actually following through and like reaching out to the people that person said to reach out to, right? Okay, what are some systems and habits that you put into place, like daily habits that really help you manage and juggle all the things that you're doing as like a visionary of these businesses and also like a day-to-day operator who's actually executing these businesses?
I think I work outside of my house. So finding people to work with, like co-work with, they could have a totally different job. But if you're sitting next to somebody else who has to dial in for a meeting, you're way more likely to focus and get something done. And I think that when I'm on my own time with no one to be accountable with, that I am way less likely to do that. And so that's been a huge thing for me. I also think that it brings like a lot of joy to my day. I interact with other people. I talk to people that aren't doing what I'm doing. I always think that the feedback is really great. You can always find a way to make it fun. You try new places. And so you start to look forward to like those hours that you're grinding on your computer when you can, because there are so many late nights at home when it's just you. It's just me, myself, and I, at my kitchen table. And so I have found that to be like a huge thing. And then the rest of the pieces start to fall into place from there because you've just like created structure.
Okay, last question, I promise. If you could tell your 2020 self one thing as you were getting started, what would it be?
I would say don't be scared. I think I've been very scared to fail at projects, and so I've delayed starting them. Everyone says that about social media, like just post, and that is just not what I'm talking about. Like if you have an idea, do not be scared to try it. I don't care how unqualified for it you think that you are. You will figure it out. And that's something that I still challenge myself with. But I have had a lot of ideas that I have sat on because I was waiting for a better time or I was waiting to learn more about it, and somebody else has done it. And I could count so many things that have been so successful that other people have done. And you can't be mad about it. Like you had the idea, they executed it. Like other people are entitled to have the same idea as you. And so if you have an idea, I don't care how underqualified you think you are to execute that idea. I think you should try it anyways, because I think you're doing yourself a disservice not to.
I totally agree. I also feel like it's a sense of urgency you have to innately have because if you don't try it now, like the time is now. I always tell my kids that. Like the time is now, just like do it now. Never say later, never say like you'll do it, you'll get around to it because yeah, someone else is going to be right behind you doing that one thing that you had the idea to do. And if it's a good idea, it likely means that somebody else has it too. And it is a matter of just time, like getting ahead and getting it done. So couldn't agree more. It was such a pleasure chatting. I loved having you on.
Me
Thank you
too.
so, so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much.